We're going to talk about the breath tonight. Our physical challenge is to raise the heart rate. Our internal challenge is to lower the heart rate. Sorry, this one looks a little bit crooked. Okay. Maybe made it crooked the other way. So the specific breathing exercise that we're doing this week, I talked about it in the newsletter that we just sent out. It's called 478 breathing. And this is one of 100 different breathing exercises that I've been exposed to over the last 25-ish years of meditation and breath work. And this is just a good one for the specific idea of slowing down your heart rate. And anytime you're breathing in for a smaller amount of time than you're breathing out has a tendency to slow down your heart rate. But I wanted to get more in depth about the idea of the breath. And it's one of my favorite subjects. It's such a simple yet incredibly deep thing. Out of all of the experiences in our life, I think that the breath has got to be up there with being the simplest and yet most deep experiences that we can possibly have. It is in its simplicity that its depth resides. So just focusing on that one thing, the breath, and allowing your mind to be totally present brings us into a totally different state from what we are probably used to throughout the day. Years ago, I read this book called Breath by James Nestor, who's a journalist. And I think I gave a talk about it then because I really loved it when I first read it. A couple of things in the book really surprised me. A couple of the things just kind of reaffirmed stuff that I had heard earlier on. But the stories that he tells are very interesting. And this is kind of following a few different people who have really become masters of the breath. And one of the chapters, he's following these free divers, where you don't have any equipment, you're just kind of diving, and he talks about how they're able to hold their breath for so long. He's got, I think, an entire book that's dedicated just to that, but that was a really interesting part of the book. And lots of different ideas. So this is what I'm going to read from tonight is actually taken from, I think it's a book review, but it's kind of a summary of the book because I didn't have time to go through and read the whole thing and summarize it again myself. But this says we breathe about 25,000 times a day, and it's pretty amazing that this thing that we're constantly doing, along with like our heart beating and blinking, it's this thing that we do so often that we have a tendency to forget about it, to completely ignore it. And this is one of the reasons why focusing on the breath is so powerful, is because it is the epitome of the mundane and the everyday, this thing that we're constantly doing. So focusing on that, by definition, kind of brings us into a deeper moment. So this is something that we have, according to this book, we have lost the ability to breathe correctly, and we'll get more into that in detail. So in the book, and again, if it's not clear, I recommend that you read this book. Again, Breath by James Nestor. So he travels to ancient burial sites, secret Soviet facilities, New Jersey choir schools, and the smoggy streets of Sao Paulo. Exploring the hidden science behind ancient breathing practices like pranayama. So this is popularized in our area by Paramahansa Yogananda. We have his picture here. He was responsible for bringing a lot of this kind of yogic energy work to the US. And Kriya Yoga, same thing. Paramahansa Yogananda made that popular here. And Tumo, which I haven't heard of, but it's another kind of ancient breathing exercise. And then he also spends a lot of time like with scientists in labs as well, and talking about that side of it. So it's thousands of years of medical texts, along with recent cutting edge studies in pulmonology, psychology, biochemistry. And we kind of get to a deeper understanding and a lot of surprising ideas. So first of all, this is the idea that we have lost the ability to breathe correctly. And this is one of the things that really surprised me and I felt was super interesting. There are so many species of mammals, 5,400 known species of mammals, but humans are the only ones with regular misaligned jaws, under and over bites, and snuggled teeth. I don't even know what snuggled teeth is. I guess that's when they like start to crowd in. So evolution isn't always better, it's just change. And we're at a point now, and have been for several thousands of years, where we're passing down these unhealthy and unhelpful deformities to future generations. And it's this jaw that really affects the way that we're breathing, and vice versa. It's kind of a two-way street. So the change started before Homo sapiens were even sapiens. There's a full timeline in the book, but over the last 100,000 years, or hundreds of thousands of years, our species changed. We ate different food, which made our brains grow much bigger, which in turn meant that they need more space in our skulls. So instead of having this kind of longer, more narrow shape, we have this like smushed face. Our brain stole this space from our sinuses, our airways, and our mouths, which then shrunk our faces. We got these tiny faces and these huge heads. And you can see this in comparing the skulls of modern Homo sapiens to prehistoric sapiens. By processing and cooking food, even in a very primitive way, we started chewing less, which resulted in our jaws getting looser, weaker, and changed the shape of our face. So learning to speak dropped our larynx and pushed our tongues back, creating too much space at the back of our throat, meaning that we are the only mammals and the only sapiens that can choke. That almost sounds impossible, but that's what this says. We even do that in our sleep through snoring and sleep apnea. So we learn how to choke each other all the time, and there's a reason that we don't try to choke animals in our self-defense class. I don't really talk about that, but I guess this confirms that you might not be able to choke. Maybe you can choke, certainly you can choke an animal, but it's not going to choke on its own. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. So if you've ever snored, if you have sleep apnea, you've experienced this. I've never seen an animal, except I know that some species of dogs that have been bred in a specific way to give them that smushed face. What is it, like pugs? Bulldogs, they have the same kind of problem where they have issues with breathing. And we've done that to them by the way that we bred them. But it was pushed on us through our parents. As we evolved, those in colder climates developed long, thin noses, which were able to warm up the cold air before it reached our lungs. Those in warm and humid climates had flatter noses, which is much more efficient for processing humid air that's ready to hit the lungs. So look at us now. We are not breathing well. We're snoring. We stop breathing altogether as we sleep with sleep apnea, which is so scary. If you don't know anybody with sleep apnea, it's like so creepy, so freaky. And never mind our teeth. These things are all unique deformities of the human race rather than something that's prevalent in mammals more generally. So our big old brains haven't been that good for us. And look, this is, you got to take kind of this with a grain of salt, but of course having a big brain is great. I actually think that it causes just as many problems as it solves, but this is an interesting idea. Just the face, the shape of our skull, the way that we are set up biologically, the structure of our ability to breathe is kind of compromised. And so we have to take that into account when we're breathing and recognize this is one of the reasons why it might be so hard for us to breathe properly. Such a natural, important thing to be able to do. So we kind of want to spend the time to relearn how to breathe and to make the most of what we've got. So you hear me saying all the time, you should not breathe in through your mouth. Now this becomes more difficult when you're in a very hard class, you're working out and you're just getting the air in however you can. But ideally you're always breathing in through your nose. Breathing out through your nose or your mouth is good either way. So here's a quote: mouth breathing, it turns out, changes the physical body and transforms airways, all for the worse. Inhaling air through the mouth decreases pressure, which causes the soft tissues in the back of the mouth to become loose and flex inward, creating less space and making breathing more difficult. Therefore, mouth breathing begets more mouth breathing. When we breathe in through the mouth, this starts to kind of reshape our mouth and make it so that becomes the way that we do it structurally. There's also just the same idea as anything else that we do. When we practice doing something in a certain way, that is going to make it more and more likely that we do it in that way in the future. So the way that we throw our technique, we are forming muscle memory. The way that we think, our thoughts are reforming these neural pathways and strengthening those connections. And so, of course, it's no surprise that it's the same thing when we breathe. If you practice breathing in through your nose, then that's what you're going to do more likely. If you practice breathing in through your mouth, then that's what you're going to do more likely. But there's also this structural change. So our small mouths cause our teeth overcrowding and many other issues. Sleeping with an open mouth makes it even worse because gravity blocks the airways, and therefore that's when we get snoring and sleep apnea. So in the book, the author talks about his experiment where he had his nose blocked up with padding for 10 days to test exactly what happens when you can only breathe through your mouth. By the end of the experiment, his snoring was 4,800% worse than it was at the beginning of the experiment. That's 48 times worse. I can't even conceive of what 48 times worse snoring is like, but it sounds absolutely horrific. And he was having 25 sleep apnea episodes each night. Some were so bad that he actually dropped below 90% oxygen, which on an ongoing basis can cause all sorts of issues. So some studies show that sleep apnea and snoring lead to things like bedwetting, ADHD, diabetes, high blood pressure, and cancers. The Mayo Clinic says that chronic insomnia is actually a breathing problem, not a psychological one. One Japanese study showed that mouth breathing reduces oxygen to the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with ADHD. And the importance of sleep cannot be overstated. I've been hearing a lot about this lately from this podcast I listened to by Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist, professor at Stanford of ophthalmology and other stuff. But he's constantly talking about how important it is to sleep. And it's not just sleeping enough, but it's like the quality of sleep. Because you can lay in bed for 8 hours, but if you're snoring or you're having sleep apnea, for you it's bad, and also for anybody else who happens to be around you, it's bad. So the quality of sleep, deep sleep, is important, and breathing correctly is a huge component for that. Another bad breathing habit we have is holding our breath, particularly when we're maybe sat at our desks at work or having a bit of a stressful day. This is something that you guys do even in class sometimes. You kind of hold your breath when you're concentrating on something, when you're stressed out, whatever. It's super important that we keep the flow of air going. And there was some really interesting research and studies that have been done of indigenous groups of people who are living in a less modernized way, and some of their practices around breathing. Even though these groups of people are in completely different continents, they all had really similar techniques and ways of breathing, which were more unfettered by some of the modern ways of living that we have. And their dental structures, facial shapes, and respiratory health are much better for it. So the author talked about one particular Native American group of people who wouldn't even smile with their mouth open in case some dirty, unfiltered air crept into their mouth. They felt so strongly that nose breathing is the clean way to breathe, and mouth breathing was quite a dirty way to breathe because you're not filtering the air. And it's true, we got these little nose hairs that are designed to filter in the air, absolutely true. Whether you think of it in those terms or not, I mean, look, let's be real. The air around us in LA is not pristine exactly. And if you're listening to this anywhere in the world and you got internet, your air probably isn't that clean either. So breathing in through the nose, even if it's filtering out just a little bit of the particulates, is better off for us. So how to breathe better, and this will be kind of a jumping off point for what I'm going to talk about in more depth, but breathing through the nose is better. This is an idea that I've never tried and I can't recommend it. I'm worried someone's going to die, but this is an option for making sure that you're breathing through your nose at night. Is you put a little piece of medical tape over your lips, which starts to tease them closed at night. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually blocking off the mouth, because I'm sure some people who are so used to breathing through the mouth, that could be a problem. But like a little bit that kind of gets them to start to close. You're not sealing off your mouth completely. And research this before you actually try it. Don't just tape your mouth shut and die. I want you back in the dojo tomorrow. The other thing we can be doing is increasing lung capacity. So there are lots of breathing exercises that we do, and I talk about it a lot in Tai Chi especially, but we discuss it in meditation and other classes. A lot of interesting research into the link between lung capacity and longevity in general health. So we can increase our lung capacity by taking really long out breaths. We practice also taking usually equally length in breaths, but accessing the full lung capacity rather than just the short little shallow breaths. So this is like when we are breathing from the diaphragm. You're not just breathing from the chest. You want your breath to be deep, not shallow. And as most of you have experienced, if you do try to do a breathing exercise, it has a tendency to be easier to breathe out for longer. And that's not wrong. There's a reason why that's easier for us. It's the mechanics of the way that breath comes in versus the way that it goes out. It can be more relaxing and easier to just let the breath out. That's part of it. But there is also usually more of a benefit for a longer exhale than there is for a longer inhale. So it's okay if that's true for you. We've also become over breathers. In today's modern age, it's between 12 and 20 breaths per minute, taking in about a half of a liter each time, which is almost twice as much as it used to be at the high end of that range. I don't even know what that sentence means, but you get it. You don't need to breathe as often as you breathe. We should practice slower breathing. Aim for about 5.5 breaths per minute, practicing fewer inhales and exhales at a smaller volume. So this is like when I say sipping the breath. You're taking slower, easy breaths. You're not gasping for breath. And like in Tai Chi, we say the ultimate, like that you should be able to do, is not the way that you should always breathe, and you will not. But if you can breathe 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out, that's 20 seconds per breath. That's 3 breaths per minute. That's quite extreme, and it is something to shoot for, but not something to beat yourself up for if you can't do it on a regular basis. Now, that's distinct from all day long, I'm trying to breathe in for 10 seconds and out for 10 seconds. It's kind of ridiculous. This is closer to 4 or 5 seconds in, 4 or 5 seconds out. Even that is going to feel quite slow. But if you can, throughout your day, just return back to the breath and try to get yourself used to taking slower, easier, deeper breaths, that's great. There was a lot in this book that talked about this range of the breath. I want to say it was between like 4 and 6 seconds for average in and out, where you really start to find a lot of great benefit to deep breathing. And last time I gave the talk, I discussed this idea of some of the chants that you see in different religions are designed with this kind of breathing pattern in mind, where it's getting you to breathe, especially out, for that kind of length of time. And the way that we practice Tai Chi, again, you'll probably end up spending more of your time breathing if you're trying to do a slow breath, but keep it doable, more like the 4 to 6 second range. But the effects that it has on us psychologically, there is a reason why religions use this kind of a kind of breathing pattern in chants and breathing exercises, because it really starts to create an altered state that invites us into a deeper state of consciousness. Another way of improving your breathing is by chewing more. So you heard it here, you can just chew gum all day long. You don't need to go and start eating bark and sticks like some of our prehistoric ancestors did, but using gum will help. It can strengthen our facial bones and jaws and help open up the airways. And like you've heard this since you were a child, you're supposed to chew your food, what is it, 32 times? Something like that. I don't think I've done that once in my life, but chewing more is better for our digestion. That's kind of separate from the issue of breathing. But I think that anytime we can just slow down and enjoy our food is great. Anytime that you're really making sure that you're chewing it properly, enjoying the taste, enjoying the experience of eating is wonderful. But chew more. It's better for your jaw. It's better for your facial structure. There are various breathing techniques. Like in yoga, they do alternate nasal breathing. You kind of block off one and then you block off the other. What they call box breathing or squared breathing, which is one of the specific ones that we do more often, where you inhale for a count, hold it at the top, exhale for the same count, and hold it at the bottom, all for the same. So that's like a square or a box. And that is just based on whatever you can handle. So if you can handle 5 seconds in, hold, out, hold, great. That's a good place to challenge most people. You might not be able to do that. If you get to the end and you're gasping for breath, it's not going to work because you want to do it repetitively. So related to that is triangular breathing, where you can breathe in and then, you can breathe in, hold at the top, and then breathe out, all for the same count. So like 5, 5, 5, or 10, 10, 10. You can also flip it. So you can breathe in, breathe out, and then hold at the bottom. That's less common, but kind of can have some of the same benefits. So this is, we talk a lot about the mechanics of the breath. You want to be breathing from the belly, again, always in through the nose, out through the nose or the mouth. And as you're doing these breathing techniques, these exercises, one of the things that you're trying to do is expand your ability to breathe more deeply and more slowly. And as I've been talking about all week, you should feel a little bit of discomfort as you are doing an exercise, like when you're exercising your body, like when you're exercising your mind. There's a little bit of discomfort as you're pushing yourself past the point of what is easy for you. So if you can very easily breathe in and out for 4 seconds, then try to push it for 5 seconds. If you can breathe in and out easily for 5 seconds, but it's a challenge for you to do box breathing and hold it at the top and hold it at the bottom, then that's a good way to practice breathing a little bit more deeply and kind of push yourself through that. So anytime, again, that you're focusing on the breath is great, but choose a specific breathing exercise and rep it and really bring it into your meditation practice. One of my favorite things to do is to start every meditation with a breathing exercise. So we'll do one when we actually sit to meditate tonight. So there are a lot of other ideas here. Some of you have, I'm sure many of you have heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman, who does breathing exercises as part of his, it's a big part of his whole thing. I don't know what to call it, his practice. And he likes to do breathing exercises and then jump in the ice, and he goes swimming in just a Speedo in the Arctic, and it's insane. But even just taking a cold shower, this can kind of stimulate your nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, in the same way that the breathing exercises do. So they kind of work hand in hand and they can help and aid each other. I personally, if I have the choice between taking a cold shower or an ice bath and doing breathing exercises, if you know me at all, you know which one I'm going to choose. I will say that I've been living in LA for, what year is it, 2022? It's been almost 12 years now, and I have gotten in the ocean fewer than 22 times. Definitely less than once a year, except for that time when I was training for the triathlon. And there were a couple of times there where even in a wetsuit, I got out and I was shaking so badly that I thought I was going to die. So I don't like the cold. Breathing is so much better. But there is a lot of benefit to that. So if you're that kind of person, you like jumping in the cold water, go for it. But do some breathing exercises first. So that kind of takes me to the end of my prepared remarks. We'll sit and we'll start with a breathing exercise, and I'll get into a little bit more of the details with that. So first we'll go over details of how to sit, and then we'll go over the breathing techniques. So sit comfortably. Remember that if you're going to breathe properly during your meditation, which is very important, you want to be sitting up with a good posture. So if you are slouching and your shoulders are hunched forward, this takes away your breathing capacity. You can hit all the lights except for this one. You want your shoulders rolled back. With that, your hands, depending on the posture with your legs that you're sitting in, your hands might be on your knees, but a lot of times it can be more beneficial to put them on your hips, either together or separate like this, because that's going to aid with keeping your shoulders rolled back. So yeah, go ahead and keep hitting the lights and I'll continue talking. You guys can see well enough. So that's shoulders back and hands here to help support, keep your shoulders back. If you're sitting cross-legged, then maybe your hands on your knees can have the same kind of effect. Your chin is parallel to the ground. You better go back out there because we're going to turn off this light in a second. Can't meditate with this bright light in my face. So your chin is parallel to the ground and your eyes are closed and upturned. Go ahead and hit the lights now. So we're going to begin with the kind of the upside down triangle breathing. And this is going to be in, hold, and out for the same amount of time. So already in the good posture for your meditation, begin with all the breath out. Breathe in through the nose for 5 seconds. Hold at the top. Out. So always in through the nose. Hold. By holding, you're not sealing off the throat. You're just kind of holding your lungs filled with air, and then out. It can be through the mouth or the nose, either one. Make sure you breathe in from the belly up. So as you hold, you're filled up like a balloon. Your belly is extended. That means that your diaphragm is engaged. And then breathe out from the chest back down to the belly. Like you're deflating again. Again, in. Let's make it a little bit longer now. Hold. Out. A little bit longer. Let's go for 7 seconds. In. Hold. Out. In. Hold. Out. Let's go for 10 seconds. In. Hold. Out. One more of 10. out. Finish with a double exhalation. Let the breath come in. Let the breath go out. So your breath should be primed now to be very deep, full breath, very slow. Also oxygenated the bloodstream. Should feel a little bit more awake, even energized, but not excited. You've just got a good awake energy to you, which is very important if you're going to meditate so that you don't fall asleep. So from here, just relax and watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. When your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. If you feel like you're really having a hard time focusing, you can go back to doing the same breathing exercise. Do it for at least 5 reps and then let it go. Just go back to feeling the breath as it naturally comes in and goes out.